your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. To be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
Well, there you go. A little visual remembrance of the gentleman we are talking about tonight. That, of course, is John Fitzgerald Kennedy, of Life Interrupted, um, by one of the monster true crime stories in American history, if you ask me. And there is a person who I absolutely love talking about these kind of um, puzzles with. And I have missed him terribly. It seems like it's been a year since he's been here. And I'm so glad he is here tonight. And it is a very special occasion because the littlest human in our group is Mr. Holden. And it is his 8th month anniversary today. He is 8 months old on this earth. And we just want to say happy day to Holden Stockton. And his daddy is here tonight. So let's bring him in. Mr. Steve Stockton, everybody. Get in here, you old rattlesnake.
Hey.
Boy,
Good to
I
be
missed
back.
you.
It's been a while. It's been 6 weeks, or it's been at least a month. But
Gosh, yeah. Little more.
moved and getting settled in and everything. And yeah, Holden is 8 months old today at 4:31 p.m. So just a few hours ago, and I got some pictures of him there.
Oh,
If you
yeah,
want
bring
to
it in. There it is. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
present the screen, that's his little.
Oh,
He's
my
covering up
goodness.
the 8, but that we couldn't keep him still.
Look at him. Oh,
And
my goodness. His mama said on I think I read where she said he was not having the photo shoot today.
No, he wasn't holding still for any part of it. There he is in his high chair. He's just recently started solid food and drinking water out of a cup and stuff.
Wow.
He's learning to play the keyboard and DJ
Yep.
there with his little thing that
Very
he's
cool.
got. And there he is in all his glory. He's a stink
Having a
bug,
blast.
that's for sure.
Oh, my goodness. Look
But
at that.
him and Mom are watching from downstairs.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Nick, how you doing, sweetheart? Good to see you, and good to see everybody from Tales Untold up in here. And I love what you're doing with that channel. Tell us about it.
Yeah, my radio show is changing platforms, and we're going to be on about 400 radio stations coming up. In the meantime, the people that were producing it, that outfit, I inherited all my own shows, of course, and I'm running them over there 2 or 3 a week,
Nice.
and having a lot of fun with it. And got other stuff coming up over there. Still doing missing persons mysteries. I took at least a month off from everything. Still
Right.
getting settled in. I'm in my new studio here, which is upstairs in our new house, but it's still in shambles. You saw pictures of it when
Yeah,
I was
I did.
still working on it.
But it's great when you
Yeah,
finally
I've
get
got
your
the
own place.
screen behind me here,
Yeah.
but there's all kinds of stuff still in boxes, still getting there. Got the computer set up, but be ready to record soon. But Holden loves it here, and Nicole loves it here. We've got
That's
all
great.
kinds of room, and right across the street, you can't see it, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts,
And a Cracker
a
Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, and a Wendy's.
You got
I'm
it
a
made.
regular at Wendy's. Yeah,
Yeah, those biscuits and gravy over there at the Cracker Barrel can't be beat either.
I haven't got to eat there yet, but that's coming up.
There was a time I actually worked at the Cracker Barrel in Huntsville, Alabama. And
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, listen, guys, if you're going in there for your breakfast, understand those people have been there since like 4 o'clock in the morning making biscuits and gravy and coffee.
yeah, I
and
see them come in. Holden
Man.
gets us up sometimes around 4 or 5, and I see the workers. Headed
they
in there.
work. They work, that's for sure. So it's good to see everybody in here. Now, I'll tell you what, I don't know what's going on YouTube. I don't know if I know I'm shadow banned. I'm demonetized over there. I don't know if they're hiding me or what. But if you're having a hard time finding me, if you're not getting notifications or something like that, it could be. I don't want to just say it, but, I've had a lot of problems on there. Last night I got
Yeah.
blocked. And, and it was for... It was less than 2 seconds, 3 seconds, somewhere around in there. And I cut that out. I cut it out, so it should be available tonight so you can see number 4. If you want to watch that hot mess that was last night, I mean, every button I hit was the wrong one or something was coming off. My modem went out. The camera went out. It's been crazy, but I keep plugging along, Steve. I keep plugging along. I mean, that's all you
Yeah,
can
well,
do.
what else can you do?
Well,
Looks
the
like we got
information is
12
good.
watching on the YouTube site, Uncommon Belief 21 and Monica Device.
Hey, Monica, how you doing?
Only 2
Welcome,
people
Uncommon.
talking, but it is showing 13 watching over there.
Okay, good. good. And I've got them over here on Rumble. We've got them over there on Facebook. So I think we should just kick this mule. What do you think?
Yeah, let's run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. And I'm right here in the middle of Kennedy country, about an hour from Brookline, where JFK was born,
Yep.
and less than 2 hours from Hyannis, Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, all those places where the Kennedys had their enclave.
And a lot of those pictures you saw in that tribute video I did, Life Interrupted, that was Martha's Vineyard, Hyannisport. And, you know, I think he was happiest on the water. I really do. When you saw his face, you know, and I've said this, this is number 5. So I've got like 2 to 3 hours in on it. It's been a lot of time spent on this. And I always try to reiterate at the beginning, this was a human being. You know, I don't care if the oil men were pissed at him, Cuba was mad at him, you know what I mean? Anything that was going on, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, here's the thing: you vote them out, you don't shoot them in the head. I mean, just plain and simple. And if you think about it, when I talked about the executive order, and at the time it was called a little something different, but it was 263 that Kennedy filled out, and it was sitting on his desk when he left to go to Dallas, and that paper stated that we were going to slowly start pulling out of Vietnam. We were in Vietnam. It was never declared a war. We were in there as, you know, and helping out and instructing and training and all these things, support. We all know that's a bunch of BS. There were supposed to be 1,000 soldiers sent home before Christmas. And JFK was laying in state in the Capitol Rotunda when LBJ went in and crossed out those 2 paragraphs and stated on 273 that we would not be pulling out of Vietnam. In fact, it was going to be escalated. So there just in America, 58,000 young soldiers died that wouldn't had. So you didn't just have one person shot in the head. You had all the people that were around him that died of mysterious deaths. We've touched on some of that. And I thought tonight, Steve, what I wanted to ask you first is, I know you hadn't had a chance to watch all the stuff that I've been talking about, or you kind of know where I'm sitting on this. We're just trying to unravel this mystery. And I've been stating that, and I did speak to you a little bit on this, that the way I'm going at it is all the threads are important. A lot of people, I think, pull out the threads and discard the ones that they don't want. And what I'm trying to do is get everybody to look at things and say, some of these things are,
every one of them are valid. And and there may be a linkage blindness. One group may have not known what the other one was doing, but I believe they all have some validity. Hey, D-Rock, how you doing?
Hey, D-Rock, welcome in. And Monica, if I didn't say hi to you on
Misfits shirt on tonight. Got lots of connections there. Misfits, Glenn Danzig's old band. They're from Bergen County, New Jersey, not too far from where you're at there, Lodi, I think.
Yeah.
And
they got their name
here today. They got their name from a 1961 movie with Marilyn Monroe.
Oh,
who has a
Misfits.
connection to JFK. So this was.
Sure did.
I didn't really think it out, but I realized I put the dots together. Like, hey, I'll
that's what I need. I need people to help me connect the dots, baby. That's for sure. So that was the thing. Now this might not make any sense, but the best way I can describe it is I've said that most people are going at it like a quilt. They've got their patches, the patches match, their pattern matches, the colors go together, and they have their section of the quilt, and they get mad at other people in the other part of this big, massive quilt that we put together, 60 some odd years, right? So if you don't look at it like a quilt and you look at it like a tapestry and all the threads are creating this big picture, you don't feel as compelled to separate everything. You let the picture play it out. You let it do what it's doing. And I think that's what causes a lot of the controversy and a lot of the problems, because I had it happen today. Somebody called me and they said, this was his exact words. He said, well, what bothers me about the JFK situation is if the driver, the Secret Service guy, who happened to be, that was Greer, by the way, turned around and shot JFK, why isn't the America pissed off about it? And I went, firstly, it's because that didn't happen. And I'm sorry to everybody who thinks that did, but it didn't. That was a piece that was put together. And I know Bill Cooper. I love, love, love Bill Cooper, but he didn't have the knowledge that Grodin had, who is the probably the specialist on the Zapruder film, that some of the frames were missing, some of them were pieced together. You have to understand this thing was on hold for so long. The first people that got to see it was when Jim Garrison had the court case in New Orleans against Clay Shaw, and he requested the film, and that was the first time public saw it.
Yeah.
That was just the jury. The next time was, I believe, 78 with Geraldo Rivera, when Grodin himself brought it in.
But it had already been chopped and edited, and
Right.
who knows?
Yeah. Right. And now Grodin's got the
There's
original.
missing frames, and there's
Yeah.
a reason those frames are missing.
Now Grodin has the original, but he has another story on how he got that, because the one that got cut up was a copy, and then somebody kept the original. So there's these kind of things going on. But when you realize after 60 years how things can get messed up, you have to take that in consideration. So what I'm saying is just look at all the threads, let them paint the picture, and understand that it's just like the famous Jim Mars always said. When you say it was the old guys, it was LBJ, it was the mob, it was the CIA, it was the FBI, it was this one, it was
Yes, it was all these.
Yes. So I thought it would be really neat tonight, since Steve and I hadn't really collaborated on this or not. I thought I would let two Texas boys lead us tonight, and it's a real nice hop, skip, and a jump through the whole thing. And that would be the wonderful who has been my spirit animal through this whole thing. And at the end, I'm going to share a little supernatural something with you. Steve knows about it, but I'm going to finish off the episode tonight with it. But I always get connected with when I do these deep dives. So whether it's Lizzie Borden or Lincoln or whatever it may be, you delve so deep in it because I'm immersed in this all day long. I'm listening to this one and old interviews, or I'm reading a book, or I'm doing whatever, trying to get information for you guys, right? And this one, I've really connected to Penn Jones Jr. And I don't recall, even in my younger days, I know I recognized the book. The book was, or is actually, there's 4 volumes, and it is called Forgive My Grief. And that's from a line from a poem. But Penn Jones was a fantastic character. And the neat thing about this is Penn started right away. I think he said he waited 3 days. These are his own words. He's basically crying his eyes out. He's a Dallas, he lived outside of Dallas, about 25 miles outside. And he was a journalist, and he just started digging in. And it was great because he was right there on ground zero. He was able to talk to people. He knew people, and he was able to get some information. And go that route. Now he went up to about 90, I think 89. He eventually passed of Alzheimer's in a nursing home. I have all the dates and everything, but the thing was, it seems like right when he stopped around in 89, Jim Mars had been studying this for decades. He's also a Texas boy, living right there in Dallas, and he kind of took over and kind of leapfrogged off of Penn Jones' work, and they both agreed with so much of it, the information they were coming up with, and he continued on. So I thought it would be real neat to look at them, Steve, and I think that they can take us through some of the mysterious deaths, some of the things that were happening at ground zero right there, that that they got to talk to a lot of the witnesses and everything else. And last night I was focusing on, just like Richard Belzer wrote a book called Hit List, and that was basically all of the different I think he took 100 of the deaths that had happened around, maybe 50 to 100, that he focused on. And my thing was, what did they want to say? What didn't the Warren Commission or whoever didn't want us to hear? You know what I mean? That would be a good place to start looking.
And something else, who guided the Warren Commission?
Yeah. Alan Dulles. you know?
And Gerald Ford.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then when Nixon stepped down, Ford got the presidency. That was his gift for keeping his mouth shut
Yep.
about
And
the JFK.
when you hear some
That's
of the
my
things,
thought, anyway.
it is. It absolutely is. And I know it's speculation, but some things just, write themselves, right? So when you hear all the different things that Gerald Ford did, you'd be shocked, Excuse me, one second. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, there's so much complicity in there. It's an octopus with 1,000 tentacles. It's not a rabbit hole. I told Cisco it's a rabbit warren. There's hole after hole, and they branch off and loop around, and you could spend a lifetime looking into this. And I personally think that even with the new stuff that's been released, it's still there's stuff. I mean, it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
If we don't know now, we're not going to know. I mean, I
Right.
don't think they're suddenly just going to come out and say, "Oh, here's really what happened."
No. And that's the thing. I was stating that throughout a couple of the episodes when people were getting the JFK files. And when you sat with, researchers who are seasoned in this, they'll tell you, unless you know what you're looking for, 80,000 it was 80,000 files. So there's even more because some of those files have 100 papers in them. I've read quite a few of them. There's some really good stuff in there. But basically what it's doing is reiterating what we already knew. And the big bulk of it is a lot of documents that have been released letting us know what the CIA had been up to and a lot of their little deals in different places that they were up to. There is the Underhill document, this is a gentleman who right after JFK got shot. And now this is a document that's come out here recently in the last dump of JFK files. And Underhill stated, and I can pull it up and show it to you, but Underhill stated that a small group in the CIA had done this, and he knew they were going to kill him. And he took off out of Dallas, wound up in New Jersey at a friend's house, and within 5 months later, he had taken off and kept trying to run. They got him, and he was gone. And there's so many stories like that involved in this. But that's basically what the JFK files have done, is they have solidified quite a few things. There are some really important things in there that came out. There's a couple about different meetings and things like that have been unredacted. But I also caution everybody that if you're watching, there's some big creators out there saying, hey, I saw this document, so I know that these people did it. And it was Israel, it was Russia, it was Cuba, it was this one, it was a mob. But yes. And that is possible.
All the above.
Yeah, that so many groups could be doing it at once. I believe personally was probably about 6 to 7 different shooters out there. There was at least 8 to 9 bullets. I mean, when you start going around and you find out there was one in the sign and one hit the curb, one hit I want to say a passerby, but somebody that was there. I mean, so many different things. How many bullets were found in the limousine? There was supposedly 2. A Secret Service guy, Landis, has come out here lately. I think he's got to be up there now in his 90s. And he just recently came out and said, I was the one who found the bullet and dropped it on the cot. Then you get into controversy with that. But see, Steve, that's what they wanted. That's exactly what Hoover said. He said, the more mud you throw in the water, the murkier it's going to get. And eventually people's heads will explode and will leave it alone, which is exactly what happened. Yeah. Right. But we have got to hand it to people like this gentleman here. This is William Penn Jones. He was the son of sharecroppers, was born in Anona, Texas on 15 October 1914, very close to my grandmother's state. He was a hobo during the Great Depression and then worked his way through the University of Texas at Austin. Now, he also went to law school by working in various unskilled occupations. He joined the United States Army and served all the major campaigns in Europe during the Second World War. This is Penn. I love Penn. He's
a good guy. Hey, Henry Nelson. How you doing, brother?
Hey,
Hope
Henry.
You're feeling good.
Yeah.
Prayers for you, my friend. We've been praying for you.
Amen. Me too. Can you see that one? You want to take that one, sweetie?
Yeah. In 1963, Jones became involved in investigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy. A fellow researcher, Gary Mack, later explained, quote, Penn was one of the first generation of researchers who felt the government was behind the assassination, probably a conspiracy involving military intelligence. He always thought LBJ was behind it somehow, end quote. He was also the author of several books on the assassination, Forgive My Grief, 1966, Forgive My Grief 2, 1967, Forgive My Grief 3, 1974, and Forgive My Grief 4. I had to think of a Roman number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1976.
1976. And all of these are available for free on the National Archives. You could just put in Forgive My Grief, archives.gov, and you can read these books for free. Look at the $2.95 up there in the corner. And you can read them for free, and I highly recommend them.
And
They're
these look like stuff that he had printed and sold himself. I don't think you'd find these in
correct
the bookstores at the time.
I think he did print them himself. He did own the paper, and he had a printing thing there. And in fact, the character of this man, he had tried very hard to keep this little newspaper going. He said, he had 1,500 subscribers, whatever. And one day a man walked in from the John Birch Society. And if you don't know what that is very far right wing, up into the KKK area. And he came in and wanted to print out a newspaper for the KKK. And as bad off as Penn Jones was for that newspaper, he said, no way. He had to turn it down. And but that's the kind of character he had. He believed in what he believed in, and he stood up for those things. He wound up becoming a brigadier general in the military, came out and bought this little newspaper, and every week he put in an article about the JFK puzzle, and he never let it go until he just couldn't anymore. There he is right there. Now, this is the famous sewer. Once Jim Morris put this sewer in his book and said it was possible for a man to be there and shoot at level, ground level. Now, I can't tell you if that happened or not. I can only tell you what I do know happened. And there have been people that went down in this and showed that somebody could go in and get back out again. And it could have been responsible for the level shot, either the one that went through the windshield or the one that actually dinged off of the metal rim of the windshield. They said it was more ground level. That's what Penn is doing. He's pointing out here this sewer. So when Jim Mars, the book Crossfire, started getting some traction, he had put that in there about the sewer, and with the first week the book came out and started getting popular, they welded this thing shut. You can't get in it anymore.
Hey, listen, though.
And that kind of underlines everything for me, Steve. How about you? Last one on Penn. Go ahead.
In 1995, the Coalition on Political Assassination presented Jones, Harold Weisberg, Josiah Thompson, and Mary Farrell with the Sylvia Megger Lifetime Achievement Award in honor of their groundbreaking and persistent work in pursuit of the truth. William Penn Jones died in a nursing home in Alvarado, Texas on 25th January, 1998.
1998. And I hope when I saw that, Steve, I said 98, I was hoping, I don't know when his Alzheimer's started kicking in or how much that he got to see. But if you think about it, the movie JFK came out in 91, and we actually got to see it on Rumble with everybody that's over on my Rumble.
That's a good film.
Yeah, we watched it together, and we talked about, the different things, the poetic license and putting, 3 or 4 characters into one and trying to get it all in the movie. But I'm really hoping that Penn Jones got to see that we were not letting it go and we were going to keep going. So it's almost like a relay race, Steve. We just keep passing this off, like keep going for the truth. And so many have stories. Yeah. So many people have stories like that, and one of the major ones is Jim Mars, and he's our other Texas boy today. And, Jim Mars wrote a lot of books. I got to speak to him a couple times. I just love him. I love his attitude. Some people get put off by him being adamant, but I'll tell you what, when you spend 4 or 5 decades studying something, you know what you know, and you know what other people don't know. And, when somebody comes in and says, well, I think it was, Mr. Mustard with a candlestick, and he knows darn well that's not true, he's going to tell you, look, that's, there's no substance to that whatsoever, look over here, that kind of thing. And that really ticked people off because they get this is a very passionate thing, and people get very attached to the theories, and the threads, their thread. They want to hold on to their thread, and that's understandable. But what I thought we would do is Jim Mars did a little thing on his YouTube channel that did a real quick jaunt, a jaunty jaunt through Crossfire, and I thought it would be really good to take a look at that. And he stops every 15 minutes or so, and then we can go and have a talk about that, and it'll get us through the whole thing real quick, beginning to end, kind of a speed through the JFK conspiracy, and we can talk about it, and we'll put all this together in a nice, neat little pocket. What do you think, Steve?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Now, did you you saw JFK? Have you read any of the stuff, Crossfire, or saw any of Jim Marr's seminars?
But it's been years. And another one, when I was looking into a lot of conspiracies, if you can find it, and it's out there on the internet, it's called the Gemstone Files. If you can find copies of that, there's a lot of information in there about Kennedy and other things that went on.
All right. Well, something I've been trying to do, if you've never been in the military, if you've never been with around a lot of shooting or a lot of people hunting or whatever, it's really difficult to understand when witnesses say, I heard one shot, I heard a slow pause, and then I heard two shots almost on top of each other. I've been trying to tell people to kind of think of the possibility that I personally believe, now this is my own opinion, that the first shot was the go shot. Everything after that was timed off of that first shot. Yeah. And I'm telling you, there could have been 10 rifles all shooting at the same time, and it's going to sound like one. It's going to sound like one shot. And the thing I'm going to show you, to give you that idea, I'm going to show you the honor guard, the 21 gun salute again, and you tell me how many shots you hear. Here we go, Steve. I think. Maybe it'll play. And there you go.
So that was your 21 gun salute.
Yes.
And it sounded like 4 shots, I think.
Yeah, it sounded like 3 shots. You've got seven weapons all shooting at the same time.
It's
it sounded like
synchronized.
3.
It just sounds like one. You hear one report, one echo, and that it doesn't sound like 21 shots. When I was a kid, I thought about that. First time I saw a 21 gun salute, I thought, that ain't 21 guns. That's only 7. Then they shot 3 times. I thought they were each going to shoot once, but it's all boom, boom, boom. It sounds
I've
like 3
actually
shots,
done that duty,
but it's
and
21.
and that's why I knew about it, because I'm like, that's just the phenomenon. When you do that, you're standing there and it sounds the same,
Yep.
So keep that in mind when you're thinking, different witnesses or whatever they might be saying, that they only heard 2 or 3 or whatever it might be. Because again, I'm telling you, I think about 5 or 6 went off at the same time. And if you watch the Zapruder film, you can see Kennedy grabs his neck. This is the one that was supposed to go through his back, through his neck, through him, turn in midair, wait a minute, make a right hand turn, angle down at like a 90-degree angle, go into Connolly, go through his back, out through his shoulder. Well, it went in through his shoulder, supposedly, out right above his belly button, went down into his wrist, did another downward spiral, went through his wrist, came out the bottom of his wrist, did a hard left turn, and down into his thigh, where it sat against the bone in his thigh. Connolly's body below ground, as we speak, still has fragments in his body from that bullet. Yet the bullet they showed you had nothing missing. This is the magic bullet. It's absolute bullshit. I'm just going to say it plain and simple, because he's got more in his, unfortunately, in his coffin right now than was missing from that bullet. But somehow they got a nation to buy it, at least be copacetic with it. You know what I mean? So let's take a look. You have anything you want to say on that? And I'm gonna look for Jim.
No, I've got some other stuff I want to talk about, but just
All right. More than likely, it's gonna come up in here because he
yeah.
pretty much
There
touches
was a
on
guy I
everything.
met in Atlanta back in the '90s called Kerry Thornley, and he wrote a book called I believe it's The Idle Warrior or The Idle Warriors, which was a sort of based on Oswald, but he wrote it before the assassination. He was Oswald's buddy in the Marines, and he was
Wow.
later tied in with stuff. Jim Garrison suspected Thornley was one of Oswald's doubles,
Yeah.
and I met the guy. He was a fascinating character. He died in
Wow.
'98 too. The book was published by Illuminate Press. My buddy Ron Bonds, that lived in Avondale Estates, Georgia, he was another one that he knew too much about too many things, and he had dinner at a Mexican buffet one night and died.
Ooh.
Nobody else got
Oh,
sick,
I
but
remember you telling me
he
about
was the
that.
one that introduced me to John Keel. In fact, I had
Yes.
dinner with him and Keel, probably at the same restaurant that Ron ate at the night that he died.
That's incredible, Steve. I
But
remember that story. I remember you telling me that. Yes. I mean,
yeah,
again, threads. You know,
yeah,
we're gonna pull on a few tonight. So what we're gonna do is gonna watch a little bit of this. It's a solid hour, so that should give us enough time. And in between, we're gonna stop and we'll talk about it. You guys in the chat can throw up your ideas and what you want to, point out and what Jim is saying. But we're gonna let this Texas star here take us on his little ride. I think he deserves it. God bless him and rest his soul. We're listening, Jim. We're still listening, just like I told you, honey. Here we go. Jim Mars,
I'm Jim
everybody.
Mars, author of Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy. And I'm here today to tell you everything you need to know about the JFK assassination.
Here we go. Down the rabbit hole we go, baby. I just love Jim. That was his main thing. I talked to him right after the Stephen King 11/22/63 came. He was so mad that he's like, everybody's just going to think it's Oswald again. I said, it was the last thing I do, Jim. I'm never going to shut up about it. How about that?
Over the years, I've been asked by many people, will we ever know the truth about the Kennedy assassination? I'm here to tell you, yes. You know it now. It's just that most people do not want to deal with it. All right. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the coup d'etat of 1963. Now, if you think that's some kind of wild conspiracy theory, follow me as we go through the factual evidence, much of which has not been presented to the public. And let's follow the tracks of this conspiracy. Dallas, Texas in 1963 was just an entirely different time and place. There were still white and colored restrooms in public buildings and drinking fountains. It was very conservative, arch conservative. The Adlai Stevenson, ambassador to the United Nations, had actually been attacked and spit on by an angry crowd in Dallas. They were upset over the United Nations. It was a hotbed of right-wing activity. And there wasn't much going on at night times except for the two after hours club, Abe's Colony Club and Jack Ruby's Carousel Club. Here we see a picture of Jack Ruby's club and a snapshot made by the club photographer of a very suspicious looking character dancing with one of Jack Ruby's strippers, Kathy Kay, on the stage of Jack Ruby's club. That was me as a 21-year-old college student. And it was the place to go. And it was not like the strip joints of today. There were strippers, but there were also musicians, live musicians, comics, ventriloquists. It was kind of a last vestige of vaudeville. And it was the place to go after hours. Just down Commerce Street from the Carousel Club was Dealey Plaza, a triangular shaped Park area on the west end of downtown Dallas, where the three main road intersections, Main, Commerce, and Elm, come together under a concrete railroad bridge known as the Triple Underpass. And this, of course, was the scene of the assassination. This photograph, made by an Associated Press photographer, James Alkins, we can see the motorcade at the time the shots were being fired. Looking through the window of the presidential limousine, you can see Jackie's white gloved hand on Kennedy's arm as he clutched towards his throat after being struck by at least one bullet. You notice his Secret Service agents on the car back of him. Only one, Clint Hill, was actually looking at the president.
Yep.
And Clint Hill was not even supposed to be there originally. He was added to the Secret Service team at the last minute at the request of Jackie Kennedy, who he was assigned to. You also notice that while Kennedy's Secret Service men don't seem to be showing any shock, surprise, they're looking around like kind of wondering what was that. And yet in the white car in the background, we see the door is open, and this was the car carrying the Secret Service men for Lyndon Johnson. They're already reacting. You'd also notice in the doorway of the Texas School Book Depository the figure of a man wearing a kind of a dark model shirt with a open to the navel with a white t-shirt on underneath it. Here we've got a close-up of that figure, and Lee Harvey Oswald's mother always claimed that was Lee Harvey Oswald. Today there are others who support that claim. However, the official government investigations have concluded it was actually another depository employee by the name of Billy Lovelady. And here we see a picture of Billy Lovelady in his broad check shirt. And we also see Oswald with his dark model shirt open to the navel with a white t-shirt on. So it's kind of up to individual interpretations as to who that might be. Of course, if it could ever be proven that this was Lee Harvey Oswald, then he couldn't have been on the 6th floor shooting a rifle. So this is actually kind of an important issue.
You got to decide.
This is a photograph taken of the front of the Texas School Book Depository at the time of the shooting by James Powell, an Army intelligence agent. And we know he was there because he made the mistake of going into the depository building and was caught there when the police sealed the building off, and he had to show his identification to get out. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is an Army intelligence agent doing taking pictures of the School Book Depository before it became prominent in the news? And it's a very good question.
It is.
And it's never been answered. The color photograph here is a photograph that I made from the 6th floor of the School Book Depository, that southeast corner window, before the 6th floor museum was put into place. So you could actually get to the window. If you notice, it's only about a foot off the floor.
That museum is a travesty.
Only about half open.
It is.
There's
I agree.
2 2-inch pipes to the left side of the window, creating a problem for someone who needs to either kneel or lay flat, try to aim a rifle off down the street. But the key problem here is you'll notice you can barely see an overhead highway sign, which is new, is at the location of where the first shots reached the presidential limousine. And as you can see, there's a tree intervening in the line of sight. That tree is an evergreen tree, a oak tree, live oak tree. It stays evergreen year round. And it was in full leaf that day and stays leafy pretty much all year. You could not get a line of sight into the center lane from that 6th floor window in 1963. To the right of this picture are 2 photographs. One of the Warren Commission showing what they said was the sniper's nest, how the boxes were arranged, and yet a Dallas News photograph taken that same day shows a whole different configuration. All of the evidence is in total disarray. The 3 shell cases that were found, according to a news photographer, one of the police officials took them in his hand, showed them to the camera, and then just tossed them back on the floor. So their position being used as evidence is irrelevant. Same thing with the boxes. They were moved around. In fact, the official photographer for the government, a man by the name of Studebaker, testified that as late as Monday following the Friday assassination, he was still moving boxes around and taking different shots up on the 6th floor. So the physical evidence was already in disarray. In this photograph, we see the arrows pointing to the various witnesses to the assassination, and we will more on them later. But you can see there was not very many people. in the western end of Dealey Plaza. This is kind of interesting, particularly where we see people in the foreground moving along the grassy area in the median of the park there. They were kept away from this area for some time by police. It said no one was allowed in that area, and it was only after the motorcade began to arrive that people filtered down from Main Street and Commerce Street and moved into that area. And I've often wondered, why is it that they didn't want people standing in that area? Because the whole purpose of the visit was to see the president and to welcome him to Dallas. And the only possible reason I can think of keeping people off the south curb of Elm Street was that somewhere someone knew that bullets might be impacting there, and they didn't want a civilian to be hit by a stray bullet, which would then cause a more detailed investigation there in Dallas. Here we see Kennedy approaching the Stemmons Freeway sign, and he's waving and everything seems to be okay. As he passes from view of the camera of Abraham Zapruder, he is struck. In this photograph, as he emerges from the sign, you can see he's already clutching towards his throat. He's been struck by a bullet. You also notice the circles. There's a man with an umbrella who begins pumping an umbrella, and a dark-complected fella who raises his arm. These men were perpendicular to the car, and we feel like that they were signalmen. It was a visual signal to shooters that they could not tell that the president was dead, and more shots were called for. In the upper left, you can see the two men with the umbrella at the bottom of the sign, which he begins to pump up and down as Kennedy gets opposite him. Then these two men, who apparently were not associated with each other, nevertheless go and sit down beside each other on the curb. And in the picture in the bottom, it certainly appears like the dark-complected man has something under his jacket, perhaps a weapon, perhaps something else.
Something I wanted to point out. I don't know. Wait a minute. Let me see if I got my. Yep. Okay. Mic was on. I thought I was muted. Something else I wanted to point out too. If you notice that the man sitting to the side with the umbrella is wearing white socks. If he's FBI, Hoover would have never have allowed that. There were several FBI agents walking around in there wearing white socks, and each one was doing something that you would consider shouldn't be done on a crime scene. Like this guy, he's got a radio, the umbrella guy. There was another one who was picking up casings off the ground and putting them in his pockets. Those casings were never seen again. Black suit, white socks. So something I just wanted to throw out there just in case. Steve, you got anything up to this point?
No, he's laying it all out there.
He's
Just
laying it out.
Boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
That's why I said this is a perfect one for this.
There's something else might be a radio, because in these pictures, and keep in mind these are blurry because they're just in the background of photographs. Nobody thought to actually take their pictures, but we see the dark-complected man holding something up to his face and an antenna sticking out from behind his head, apparently talking on a radio. In the bottom left, we see him get up and stick the radio back into his pocket and saunter off towards the triple underpass, while the rest of the crowd are rushing up the grassy knoll where all the people in that end of the plaza said the shots came from. Not shown here is the umbrella man, who takes one look at everybody rushing up the knoll and then turns and walks the other way. Here's a shot about the time of the fatal headshot. In the red coat is Jean Hill, a witness, and next to her is Mary Mormon, who is taking a very crucial photograph right at this moment. Across the way on the steps of the grassy knoll, we see Emmett Hudson, the groundskeepers for that area, who said the shots came from up behind him where the police patrols were, although there were no policemen officially stationed in that area. Also notice that the only Secret Service agent to respond to the shooting was Clint Hill, who was assigned to Jackie Kennedy and not even supposed to be on this trip. And he rushes up to get on the back of the car. This is a frame from the famous Zapruder film that shows Jackie Kennedy crawling out on the rear deck of the car. There's been a lot of misinformation about this action. It's been said she was trying to escape the shooting. It's said she was trying to help Clint Hill get on the car. None of this is true. The truth is, based on her testimony, as well as the testimony of a doctor and nurse at Parkland, was that she crawled on the rear deck of the car under her own volition, reached out and picked up a piece of the president's head. She still and crawled back into the car under her own power. Clint Hill was doing all he could do to hang on to the car that was beginning to accelerate. She still had this piece of skull in her hand at Parkland Hospital, and when a doctor approached her, quite pathetically said, "Here, will this help?" and offered it to the doctor. Why the misinformation about this? Because if she picked up a piece of his head on the rear deck of the car, that indicates a shot from the front, the grassy knoll.
Exactly. Exactly. You always have to ask, why don't they want you to know? It tells on them real quick.
Various people in the motorcade, including John Connolly's wife and Senator Ralph Yarborough, others have told me they smell gunpowder as they pass through the lower end of Dealey Plaza and into the Triple Underpass. Others reported seeing a puff of white smoke drifting off the grassy knoll behind the picket fence. The debunkers say, no, that couldn't happen. Modern rifles don't smoke. Well, they do, especially if they're freshly oiled, and that there couldn't have been any smoke that day. And yet here we see a frame from a news photographer that clearly shows the puff of smoke drifting off the grassy knoll. Again, more evidence of a shot from that direction. At the bottom, you see from a film the number of people that are rushed to the grassy knoll. Everyone in that end of the plaza said they believe that's where the shots came from. Behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll, everything was just chaotic. People poured back in there, and they were all looking around. Jean Hill, who was one of the first ones to lead the rush up the grassy knoll, said she was looking for someone running with a gun. Instead, she said all she saw was some policemen and railroad workers, although there were no policemen officially stationed in that area at that time. But this crowd of people rushing up to the back end of the knoll obliterated any potential evidence. The railroad workers on the bridge said they thought a shot came from behind the picket fence, and they rushed around there, and they found footprints near the fence with cigarette butts, as though somebody had stood there for some period of time. But yet most of this got obliterated when the crowd showed up, and the Warren Commission, the government investigations have all just ignored it. Not only were policemen seen on the grassy knoll, but also men were encountered in suits and ties who showed Secret Service identification and identified themselves as Secret Service agents, although there were none officially stationed. All of the Secret Service agents were either already at the Trade Mart, where Kennedy was to make a noon speech, or traveling in the motorcade. So who were these men with Secret Service identification that were good enough to fool Dallas police officers? That question has never been adequately answered.
Take a quick pause, see if you wanted to say anything about that. What do you think about the pictures with the puff of smoke and there? Now, I thought there was only one.
I think there was one shot, definitely, that came from up there, if not several. Mm-hmm. But if you look at some of the evidence, and I think Jim talks about this later, it's a kill box. It's a U-shaped thing, and that's why he named it Crossfire. Yeah, because anybody in any of the points could have been the gunman that did it.
Exactly. I'm going to show you right here. I got a map. Let me look here real quick. I want to tell you this since you brought that up. That's amazing. I'm sorry. I've got so many slides here. I almost had 50 slides, maybe more. I think this is it. Right there. Now, if you see where Lee Harvey Oswald, again, I don't even know he was up here at this point. I think he was on the second floor having a Coke. I really do. The women on the stairs, the girl on the stairs, the book, documents have come out in the JFK files that actually back that up. that these women were on the stairs, and they didn't see Oswald. He was down in the second floor. So who's up here in this window? I couldn't tell you. But from this window, if you look down the street, look the way the motorcade came. It started here, and it went up. If I was in this window, my best shot's right here. Why would you wait for it to make the turn and come down here, and your first shot's all the way down here? This is the shot right here in the back. This is right before it gets to the grassy knoll. Why? Because you had a guy here. You had a guy over here at the triple overpass. You had a guy probably over here. You had one on the Del Tech building. This right here is the Dallas Police Department, believe it or not. Look how close they were. And up here is the whole top floor here is the jail. And all of these prisoners were yelling and screaming and trying to get people to listen that they saw men on these buildings and they saw men in these windows, and nobody interviewed them. And you certainly didn't see them in the Warren report. And the reason they waited for this turn is for crossfire.
Yeah.
You're in there, you're stuck like a rat. You can't get out, you can't go back, you can't go forward. They wanted this man dead. And I would say that there was more than one team doing that. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, let me get him back. He's doing a good job, isn't he? It's like he's done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim
knows what he's talking about.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. All right.
Today, we are beginning to see documentaries that present computer analysis of the Kennedy assassination. And, they can prove this, they can prove that, they can prove that Oswald could have been the only lone. But let's face it, computer analysis is only as good as the information that goes into it. It's the old garbage in, garbage out axiom. And unfortunately, we've had garbage in. And what am I talking about?
So true.
Okay,
I'll be right back and get hot water.
Adequate computer analysis of the Kennedy assassination would require absolutely correct data from Dealey Plaza, the topography, the elevations, the distances, and this was done. On the Monday following the Friday assassination, Life magazine hired Dallas surveyor Robert West and his associate Chester Brenneman to take still frames of each frame of the Zapruder film and then do survey work in Digby Plaza, measuring all the distances, elevations, etc. This was done. Both of these men told me they did not feel like the assassination could have been done by one man. Later in the spring of 1964, both men again performed survey work for the Warren Commission, the government's official investigation. And what they found was pretty amazing. This is a copy of their original plat map for Dealey Plaza that was done for the Warren Commission in the spring of 1964. And Chester Brenneman gave me a copy of it. As you can see, they've marked a yellow mark on the curb. There were two yellow swashes on the curb of the south side of Elm Street, which doesn't make any sense. If it was there to say no parking, then the whole curb should have been painted yellow. Instead, there were just two little brief stripes. And what happened right in between them? The fatal headshot. Some of the researchers believe these were visual markers to aid snipers in targeting the president inside of this kill zone.
I have to add this in that I can't remember whether it was Jean or the other one, the babushka lady, but one of them stepped on that curb. I think it was the one who took the picture. She kept her shoes, Steve, and just recently has shown everybody, where she feels like she's, how did she say it? That it's been enough time to where she's not going to be killed like a bunch of her friends were for speaking out, but she kept those shoes and they still have the yellow paint where she stepped on that curb. It was still wet. They must have used an oil base. But how mean is that to think about? This is how deep they got. They actually put markers on it. And if you think about it, it was only markers on one curb. The curb that they were on was 3 blocks, I guess about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet in length. And it was only on the top and on the right side. Well, that's so you could see it from high above and from the grassy knoll. There wasn't anything on the other curb facing in the other direction or towards. Do you see where I'm coming from? They
Yeah.
were that meticulous. Incredible. When you hear that, it just makes your skin crawl, you know? And ugh. These people, they just make me sick. You know what I mean? Oh, now what's happened? What is that about? Okay. Come on now. Get back up there. Come on. Come on. What are you doing? All right. There we go.
It was marked on this map. Further up, we have something marked that says the area of where a bullet struck the curb. They marked this extraneous bullet. They also marked where the first shots took place and made a note that said this area hid behind tree for any shot from depository as of this date, May 1964. So the surveyors clearly showed that the assassination could not have happened as the government claims, with Lee Harvey Oswald 3 shots from the school book depository. And yet, when the Warren Commission published this version of the survey map, they had deleted all of these references. That's suppression of evidence. Worse than that, we see here that the Warren Commission altered their numbers of the frame numbers from the Zapruder film. Well, this throws the whole survey into question. This means that any computer analysis made from the data presented by the Warren Commission is not correct, which means it doesn't prove anything. Lieutenant Jack Rebel was the intelligence officer for the Dallas Police, and according to his testimony, he left the Texas School Book Depository, rode back to the Dallas Police Station with a military intelligence agent, a man from the Office of Naval Intelligence. According to his testimony, he left the Texas School Book Depository, rode back to the Dallas Police Station with a military intelligence agent, a man from the Office of Naval Intelligence. And upon arriving at the police station, he met with FBI agent James Hosty, who had been in charge of Oswald's case. No telling what he learned from both these men, but what we do know is he then went and immediately made out this report, which is a list of the employees of the Texas School Book Depository. Heading his list is a Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald had only lived at 602 Elsbeth, and this address could not be found anywhere on his employment records at the Texas School Book Depository. He had lived there in the fall of 1962. So where did Jack Rebel get this information? At the time of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they interviewed a Colonel Robert Jones of the 4th Army Command out of San Antonio, and he told that on the day of the assassination, he got word from Dallas that they had arrested a suspect, and his name was Alex James Hidell. And he said he went to the Army military intelligence files and found a Alex James Hidell who cross-referenced to a Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. So this was a mistake that had been made in military intelligence files, and what it tells us is that it was the U.S. military who tipped off the Dallas police as to the identity of their suspect.
That's how Hoover got it so early. At least that they know that that's where it came from, because he's the only one that had that wrong address. Little details, very thin little threads, very important.
So about an hour and a half after the 12:30 p.m. shooting on Friday, November the 22nd, the police got a call that someone had sneaked into the Texas Theater in South Dallas, and they rushed out there with squad cars, assistant district attorney, FBI people, and even men who identified themselves as CIA.
For somebody sneaking in a theater.
We see our first picture of the key suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald. So the slightly built Lee Harvey Oswald was taken into custody and taken to the Dallas police station. When he arrived at the police station, he had 2 sets of identification on him. One said he was Lee Harvey Oswald. The other said he was Alex James Hidell, as we can see from this selective service card, which apparently is some sort of phony document, because the selective service cards at that time did not have photographs on them. So this is something that was put together. the police were saying, well, you know, who are you? And Oswald was being uncooperative. He said, essentially, you're the cops, figure it out. But we now know that at that exact time, less than 2 hours after the shooting, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover is on the telephone to Attorney General Robert Kennedy saying, we have our man in Dallas. It's Lee Harvey Oswald. He's an ex-Marine. He defected to Russia. He's a mean-spirited individual in the category of a nut. So Hoover already had the lone nut scenario worked out less than 2 hours after the shooting, at a time when the Dallas authorities weren't even certain of who they had in custody. Circumstances can't lie. Circumstances are the circumstances. And although this is circumstantial evidence, I think it's clear that somebody in position of authority knew more about what was happening than the Dallas authorities or the media or the public at that time.
That Hoover thread getting a little thick, isn't it? Think about it, guys. Who was at the party the night before at Murchison's?
Yeah.
Hoover, LBJ, Nixon, and Connolly. And keep going.
When it comes to the idea of more than one Oswald, you really get into a morass. And yet there is clear evidence that at the very least, someone was impersonating Lee Harvey Oswald leading up to the time of the assassination. In this document, dated June 1960, this is 3 years before the assassination, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was personally aware of Lee Harvey Oswald and sent this memo to the Security Division of the State Department, warning that an imposter might be using Oswald's birth certificate. In other words, someone had substituted themselves for Oswald. This is very, very important. Here we see a composite of photographs of Oswald. The top four are the first two are pictures of Oswald about the time he entered the Marines. The second two pictures are pictures supposedly taken of Oswald in Russia. And the bottom four pictures are all of the Oswald who returned to the United States. Two of them are his passport photographs. One, his arrest photograph from New Orleans. And finally, at the lower right is his arrest photograph taken in the Dallas Police Headquarters. As we can see, the bottom four pictures, this fellow all pretty much looks alike. But the guy on the top doesn't quite look right. The Warren Commission published this photograph of Oswald, and they said taken about the time of his attempted defection to Russia. As we can see, it's really an odd-looking photograph because we see the light source coming from his right with heavy shadow on the left side of his face, and yet look behind him on the wall, his shadow goes to the right, as if there was a light source from the left. One shoulder seems broad and the other shoulder is very slopey, and there's an odd notch in his hairline. The eyebrow and the side of his mouth on his right side appears to be retouched or painted in. And when you draw a line down through this the picture, it seems like it's a composite picture of two separate individuals. Lee Oswald on the right and Harvey Oswald on the left. This was a common practice among the intelligence operatives to combine photographs like this so that someone who's impersonating someone can pass through customs and surveillance, and they look pretty close to the original person. Here again, we see evidence that these photos have been faked of two different people. We see the Moscow photograph on the right, and on the left we see the Mintz photograph, and we see the same problem. They seem to be of two separate people, and yet when combined we have a person that looks somewhat like Lee Oswald. At the bottom center we have two of the photographs, one when he was in the Marines and one later in Russia. And when you match up the eyes, nose, and mouth to the proper proportions, you find one of them is shorter than the other. And this was confirmed by his medical records in the Marines, which showed Oswald to be 5'11", and yet at the autopsy, it showed him to be 5'9". Even his own mother in 1967 asked to have the grave exhumed, questioning marks and scars on the body and questioning the identity of the person in the grave, and she was not the only one. Paul Grudy, who was the funeral home director who buried Oswald, told me that about a week after they buried Oswald, a Secret Service representative showed up, was asking him questions about scars, marks on the body, and one of them finally commented that we don't know who we have buried in that grave. So there's considerable doubt over the identity of the man identified as Lee Harvey Oswald.
I think they've moved his body twice too. Don't quote me on that though. I believe it's twice. And this is very common. I bet you Sirhan had several, and this is what they did to cause confusion. Don't be confused. Don't you let them.
A cover-up of this crime began almost immediately, even before the echoes of the shots died away. Here we see the limousine at Parkland Hospital. The top has been placed back onto the limousine. You see a bucket of water there. They were washing off the seats. They destroyed this as evidence. It should have been left alone.
Just like Butler.
The car then was sent on orders of Lyndon Johnson off to be rebuilt before there was any forensic study made of the car. It was bulletproof glass was put in, and it was painted black, and it is now on display in Dearborn, Michigan. But ironically enough, the new president, Lyndon Johnson, refused to ride in it. What I consider a smoking gun is the testimony of an FBI fingerprint expert named James C. Cadigan. Someone altered this official statement and testimony, and it's interesting to see why. It also explains why so much of the evidence is in controversy. In his testimony, James Cadigan was asked why Exhibit 820 was not desilvered. It's a process for bringing out fingerprints on various things. And he replied, I could only speculate. And they said yes. And he went on to say that all of the evidence was taken from the Dallas police the night of the assassination against the wishes of the Dallas police. Captain Fritz, who was in charge of the investigation, said, well, I need to get people to identify the weapons. I need to talk to people about this evidence. And how can I do that when you take it away from me? But they sent it all to Washington. And according to Cadigan, there was a huge number of higher echelon FBI officials and security people poring over this evidence that whole weekend. Police Chief Curry said that they wanted the evidence up in Washington in the laboratory, and Captain Fritz said, oh, I need to get some people to try to identify the gun, to try to identify the pistol and these things. If it's in Washington, how can I do that? And he said, but somebody in high authority was requesting this, and we finally agreed as a matter of trying to cooperate with the federals. Then Chief Curry said to the Warren Commission, he says, as far as I know, we have never received any of that evidence back. It's still in Washington, I guess. J. Lee Rankin, the chief counsel of the Warren Commission, said, yes, the commission is still working with it. So the government kept all the evidence to begin with, totally illegally, totally against all the procedures at that time, because there were no laws, federal laws, about assassinating the president. On November the 26th, several days after the assassination, there was a meeting held with the Dallas Police, Dallas County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI, and it was announced that they had asked the FBI to come into the case. And on this day, this is when it became the official government evidence. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the FBI had all the evidence beginning the night of the assassination and for 3 full days before it became the official evidence. They could have taken anything out. They could have put any fabricated evidence in. There was no oversight and no legal chain of evidence and custody. This is the cause for the controversy that still rages over the evidence in the Kennedy assassination, and it could all be laid at the feet of federal officials.
Yep. Who had the power, who had the motive, who had the ability. White socks. Anybody ever told you about
all
the white
of the
socks?
evidence was in the hands of the FBI with no public oversight, no chain of evidence, is only one example of evidence that was skewed, changed, altered, fabricated. Here we see on the right the Commission Exhibit 2003 of the Warren Commission, which is the Dallas Police evidence sheet. This is the sheet that listed all the evidence that they had in the assassination. And you'll notice at the era that it shows 3 spent rounds were found. Okay, 3 shots, 3 spent rounds. And at the bottom, it's blank there, except for the page number. On the left is the Dallas Police evidence sheet as recovered in Texas. And it shows spent rounds found 2. They only had 2 rounds. And at the bottom, it says paraffin test made on Oswald was positive on both hands, negative on the face. As soon as Oswald arrived at the police station, they put paraffin on his hands and face to see if they could detect nitrates or gunpowder. I have copies of that report, and it states that there were no gunpowder on his hands or face, and only traces of nitrates on his hands, but none on his face. This is pretty good evidence that he had not fired a rifle that day, because if he had fired that loose bolt Mannlicher Carcano in 5.6 seconds, he would have had to have done it from a rifle position like this. He couldn't lower it. Had to be like this, and he had to cock it like that to stay within the time frame. And when he pulled the bolt back, he would have been hit with gases, nitrates, and gunpowder from that rifle. And yet, just less than 2 hours after the shooting, there was no trace of that on his cheeks. But again, we see in the evidence sheet presented to the public through the Warren Commission, instead of explaining this or explaining why there was no gunpowder on his face or hands, they simply delete that. They hide the evidence away from you. Here we see what appears to be 2 identical FBI reports. They both have the same file number and dated the same date and signed by the same agent, Vincent Drain. One says that the wrapping paper found at the book depository matches the same paper that they said was used as a gun case to bring the rifle into the depository by Oswald. Since Oswald worked at the depository and had access to the wrapping paper there, this is incriminating evidence to show that Oswald may have gotten the paper from the depository, his place of work, and used it to bring in the rifle. However, the other document says that the paper does not match the paper bag that they said contained the rifle. So now, which one of these documents is correct? Do they say the exact opposite thing? When FBI was questioned about this back in the 1980s, a spokesman said, well, the one that says the paper did not match is a phony document, which leads me to wonder how many other phony documents are in FBI files. Again, another clear example of chicanery taking place over the evidence in the Kennedy assassination.
It's a great question.
Here we have the evidence as presented in the National Archives today, and we find that now there are 3 empty shell cases. Dallas police said one of the police officials carried a 3rd cartridge around in his pocket for a few days, didn't think to turn it in as evidence, and it suddenly turned up days later after they had decided that the scenario called for 3 shots. You notice that 3 of the cartridges here, 2 empties and 1 live round, have a dent on the shoulder of the cartridge. This, they said, was a peculiarity of Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano rifle. The 3rd shell casing that turned up belatedly has no such crimp, indicating it was never loaded into the Oswald rifle. So we just see more and more strange inconsistencies in the evidence. A Ronald Simmons of the Army Ballistic Test Center told the Warren Commission that they could not sight in the Oswald rifle using the telescopic sight because it was misaligned, and they had to add 3 metal shims under the telescopic sight to make it accurate enough to test. The Warren Commission even graciously showed us photographs of the 3 metal shims they had to put in under the telescopic sight to make the Oswald rifle accurate enough to test. Couldn't have hit anybody with it.
There you go.
Here's a photograph of the evidence they had against Oswald, including up here in a black circle, his Minox spy camera, which carried a 5-digit serial number, which meant it was not commercially available in the United States. So the question remains is what intelligence service issued him a small Minox camera, commonly known as a spy camera?
I want to add this in here. One, when he supposedly, and I don't even think he purchased the Mannlicher Carcano. I've got all the documents on that as far as the handwriting. I'm looking at the handwriting analysis. I personally think it was a female handwriting and that filled out the order form. Now, this was supposedly Oswald had ordered under Alec Heidel's name, which is one of the IDs he had in one of his wallets. Because we know from other episodes I've done, 3 Oswald wallets were found. How many wallets do you carry, Steve? 3, right?
Rarely one at all, but one is all I have.
Well, 3 were found that day, all supposedly belonging to Oswald. But that's
I only
a whole
take it
nother
if
episode.
I'm going out,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've just got one.
Nuts. Another one is the Minox camera. Now, it's really odd how many people had this Minox camera. This is a tiny little spy camera. Steve, you probably know exactly what we're talking about. And there was one found here with Oswald. Ruth Payne had one, and her husband had one. Now, these again are very similar to what Jim was saying with the serial numbers. Now, I wanted to stop and tell you that if you hear that at the time that this happened, that you could purchase a Minox camera at what was the name of Neiman Marcus for $350. It is a Minox camera, but it did not have the serial numbers like the ones that the government gave out. I just wanted to tell you that in case you heard about that. This evidence, I'm telling you right now, they could have never convicted him in court with this stuff. They had to kill him. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Silvered. It's a process for bringing out. Police Chief Curry said that they wanted the evidence up in Washington, and it was announced that they had asked the FBI to come into the case. And on this day, this is when it became the official government evidence. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the FBI had all the evidence beginning the night of the assassination and for 3 full days before it became the official evidence. They could have taken anything out. They could have put any fabricated evidence in. There was no oversight and no legal chain of evidence and custody. This is the cause for the controversy that still rages over the evidence in the Kennedy assassination, and it could all be laid at the feet of federal officials. All of the evidence was in the hands of the FBI with no public oversight, no chain of evidence, is only one example of evidence that was skewed, changed, altered, fabricated. Here we see on the right the Commission Exhibit 2003 of the Warren Commission, which is the Dallas Police evidence sheet. This is the sheet that listed all the evidence that they had in the assassination. And you'll notice at the
We already saw this part, right?
that it shows 3 spent rounds were found.
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't mean to hit it. I'm sorry, guys.
And at the bottom, it's blank there, except for the page.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
On the
also Scott,
left,
good to see you.
Is the Dallas Police evidence sheet as recovered in Texas, and it shows spent rounds found 2. They only had 2
Here we
rounds.
Here we go. Sorry.
It was not commercially available in the United States. So the question remains is what intelligence service issued him a small Minox camera, commonly known as a spy camera. In the lower left-hand corner, you notice a photograph of the back of General Walker's house, who the government says Oswald took a shot at in the spring of 1963. And you'll notice that there was a car parked there, and although you cannot read it, it's very small, you can see that there was no hole or destruction to this photograph. Yet when the Warren Commission published this photograph, somebody had punched a hole in the license plate, so
Look at
you
that.
couldn't read the license plate and find out whose car this actually belonged to. And this hole was punched while this photograph was in official custody. This is destruction of evidence, and under our
They
legal
just didn't even
system, it's
care.
considered a crime. Probably the strongest piece of evidence that convicted Oswald in the minds of the public was the fact that on Monday night, after the Friday assassination, Henry Wade, the district attorney of Dallas, mentioned to the news media, says, "Oh, have I said we found his fingerprints on the rifle?"
This is
Well,
good.
fingerprints on the rifle, that's, pretty well cinched it in the public's mind. But let's take a close look at this serious piece of evidence.
Let's do that, Jim.
Again, all of the evidence, including the rifle, was taken from Dallas the night of the assassination and sent to Washington and to the FBI. The next day, under this document, signed by J. Edgar Hoover himself, it clearly states no latent prints of value were developed on Oswald's revolver, the cartridge cases, the unfired cartridge, the clip of the rifle, or the inner parts of the rifle. So in other words, Saturday, following the Friday assassination, there were no fingerprints available on that rifle. On Sunday, the rifle was shipped back to Dallas. On Monday morning, it was taken by 2 FBI agents to the Miller Funeral Home in Fort Worth, where they were preparing Oswald for burial. According to the funeral home director, Paul Grudy, who has publicly stated this, he was there and present when the FBI put Oswald's dead hand on the rifle. In fact, he told me he had a hard time getting the fingerprint ink off of Oswald's dead hand in time for the burial. And that evening, Henry Wade says, "Have I mentioned we've got his fingerprints on the rifle?"
There it is.
Again, serious question about so-called hard evidence. Even when it came to the official result, the government investigation was also skewing the evidence, shading the testimony, and according to this memorandum from attorney Albert Jenner to the chief counsel, J. Lee Rankin, he says, "Our depositions and examination of records and other data disclose that there are details in Mr. Eli's memorandum which will require material alteration and, in some instances, omission." So they're admitting here that they're changing, altering things, and that they're leaving out facts and data about Oswald's background. So much for a competent, in-depth investigation.
There you go. Can you believe they can't let them get away with it? I don't care if they're dead. Dig them up and hang them. I mean, I'm so mad at this. I've been mad at this for 50 years.
So with so much evidence missing, altered, changed, no telling what, nevertheless, the Warren Commission concluded that one shot struck Kennedy in the back of the neck, passed through, did not strike any bone, went on to strike Governor Connally, causing 7 wounds to these 2 men. Removed the slug, was recovered intact from a stretcher in Parkland Hospital. The second shot missed, and the third shot struck Kennedy in the right side of the head, killing him. That was the official version, and actually remains the official version, although the House committee in 1980 concluded that there was at least 1 shot from the grassy knoll, but it probably missed. So you can see the confusion now over what's happened in it, and this confusion can all be laid at the feet of federal officials. Kennedy was never shot in the neck. How can I say that? Well, here is the official autopsy report, which clearly states a second wound occurred in the posterior back at about the level of the 3rd thoracic vertebra. Well, that's below your shoulder blades, to the right of the baseline. And by the way, that's signed by Dr. George Berkeley, Kennedy's personal physician.
I'm like this
here on the autopsy face sheet. On the left, we see the bullet mark in the back.
And actually, it was 2 shots
right
in the
of the backbone, below
right
the shoulder blades.
Another episode.
But you notice the bottom left-hand portion of this diagram is blank. And that has allowed them to argue that this is just a sketch and it's not to scale and it's not in proper proportion. And actually, the wound was much higher up on the neck. And yet, if on to the right, you see the original document, and it was marked verified by his personal physician, Dr. George Berkeley. Again, more cover up of important and critical information. The two things they could not alter are the bullet holes in his jacket and the bullet hole in his shirt, which are now still available in the National Archives. And they locate the wound exactly where the autopsy said, third thoracic vertebra below the shoulder blades to the right of the backbone. Now, it was argued that, well, he was waving and the shirt and his coat jacket rode up, and therefore the bullet hole was actually much higher than it shows on the jacket. But hey, the same bullet hole is on the shirt, and your shirt doesn't rise up no matter how much you want to raise. So these are all specious arguments trying to explain why there was a bullet hole in the neck and not in the back.
And who moved that bullet hole?
But to simply go back to some of the testimony of people who were there, we find that the autopsy doctor, Dr. Humes, said a bullet hole located below the shoulders, 2 inches to the right of the midline of the backbone. We also see from Secret Service agents, Clint Hill said, I saw an opening in the back about 6 inches below the neckline to the right-hand side of the spinal column. Glenn Bennett, another Secret Service agent, testified, I saw the shot hit the president about 4 inches down from the right shoulder. So they all located the wound at the same location as the autopsy, in the back. So please understand, Kennedy was never shot through the neck. And that, of course, destroys the single bullet theory. And if the single bullet theory does not hold up, then the lone assassin theory does not hold up.
Exactly.
So in this diagram, if we take the actual point of the back wound, third thoracic vertebra, and connect it to the throat wound at the Adam's apple in front, we've got an upward trajectory, which makes no sense because supposedly the assassin was 60 feet in the air shooting downward. Perhaps this is a new conspiracy theory, the hidden assassin in the trunk of the car, but I don't think so. But it just shows the disarray of the evidence in this case and the fact that none of this is ever adequately presented to the public. Where did the idea come from that Kennedy was shot through the neck and not the back? It came from Gerald R. Ford, our only unelected president. He was appointed vice president by Nixon, and then when Spiro Agnew resigned under threat of prosecution, and then when with the promise that when Nixon was about to be impeached, he pardoned him of all crimes. And so Gerald Ford, who was a member of the Warren Commission, ordered the authors of the Warren Commission report to change the wording from Kennedy was shot in the back to Kennedy was shot through the neck. This allowed them to argue that cockamamie single bullet theory. The foundation of the single bullet theory is this slug right here, Commission Exhibit 399. They said this was a slug found on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, although they never could nail down whose stretcher it was. They tried to say it was Governor Connolly's stretcher, and yet there's evidence to indicate that's not true. The hospital technician, Daryl Tomlinson, said, I'm not going to say it came from that stretcher. In fact, he said quite the opposite. It seems actually it was planted there. And who could have planted this slug in Parkland Hospital? Well, Jack Ruby was seen at Parkland Hospital about 1 o'clock.
Ruby was seen everywhere.
Shooting. So, and going into the hospital carrying television equipment. So it's entirely possible that Jack Ruby played a role in all of this even before he shot Oswald. In this news clipping, we see that John Connolly's doctor clearly stated that he was not struck by the same bullet that hit President Kennedy. But the real proof came in this x-ray of Governor Connolly's wrist.
Look at that.
As you can see, there's more bright bits of metal that stayed in Connolly's wrist than are missing from the bullet that the government says caused the wound.
His leg too.
That's how ridiculous some of this so-called evidence is. So what we have here then is the theory that one shot coming from 60 feet in the air struck Kennedy in the back, third thoracic vertebra, didn't hit a bone, but somehow coursed upwards through his body, exited out his throat, somehow twisted around in midair, came back down, struck Connally near the right armpit, shattered his fifth rib, came out the front of his chest, shattered his right wrist, and ended up in his left leg. It's impossible.
Yep.
It didn't happen.
Nope.
But you're expected to believe it happened.
Nope.
And they've got experts who will tell you how many angels dance on the head of how many shots could actually do
I love
this.
Jim. I hope you're watching with us, Jim.
This is a transcription of the Warren Commission meeting for January the 27th, 1964. They were just beginning their investigation. And yet, even at this early date, they knew that this single bullet theory did not work. Here we see their own chief counsel, J. Lee Rankin, as he ruminates and says, well, it seems quite apparent now, since we have a picture of where the bullet entered in the back, that the bullet entered below the shoulder blade to the right of the backbone, which is below the place where the picture shows the bullet came out the neckband, the shirt in front. And that bullet, according to autopsy, didn't strike any bone at all. That particular bullet can go through. So how it could turn, and he suddenly realizes, he's saying, how could it turn in midair and go strike Connally? And he realizes it doesn't work, so he stops. And that's the end of that. They knew better, but still they came out and lied to the American people and told them that this one bullet passed through Kennedy's neck, caused all the wounds.
And they lied with smiles on their faces, and they lied. Keep in mind, everything I started this out with, 58,000 in Vietnam, not just the people that they killed here, good people like Lee Bowers that wanted to come out and tell the truth. He came out, he spoke to Mark Lane, and he's dead within 2 months after, gone. I mean, there's 100 stories like that, probably more at this point. I stopped at 4 to tell you about was... This is also incredible. I mean, Arlen Specter, he was a nut. He's the one that came up with the magic bullet theory on the Warren Commission. How they were able to stand in their suits and their straight faces and lie to people this way. You have to understand that this whole section was moving like this. I really believe that, just like Jim said, the cover-up started way before. I mean, they were going nuts. They got a bullet hole in the windshield they weren't expecting on, so they take it over to their Parkland. They're telling nurses to go get buckets of water to clean the blood out of a crime scene. The thing is, put on a C-130 or whatever, taken to Dearborn, Michigan, taken apart. All of this is insanity. And what Jim is saying here, I believe this was done around 90. I know it came out in 89, like I said. At that point in time, Penn Jones is already probably at the nursing home. The way this folded between these two guys was quite amazing. Jim takes over. He's been studying it since he was 22. So it's not that he started, when Penn Jones stopped. He'd been going all along. But that's when he kind of kicked in. And the movie Crossfire, based on this gentleman's book and also on Jim Garrison's book, was brought out in 91. So I would say this is probably 89, 90, somewhere around in there. But also with this bullet and, all this other stuff, you have to understand that since he's done this, there has been more that's come out, and you're seeing more with the bullets that were found. There's 2 more bullets found, almost pristine, Steve. Mm-hmm. I have a theory, and I don't know how much water it holds, but I'm imagining if I was a sniper, if I was a sniper, isn't there a song? If I was a sniper, you were a lady. Anyway, I think I would probably be using something that didn't have as much gunpowder impact for the noise. If I was using a suppressor, a lot of these bullets, it seemed, were hitting their target, but weren't penetrating. Kennedy's got a hole in his back and has come out since, because now we've got the shirt release. We've got some other things released that would be held back. So these file dumps really are not a nothing burger. Trust me, guys. So now we know he's got 2 holes, and it almost seemed like a bullet hit him, penetrated about 1/4 of an inch into his back, and then fell out and onto the seat, found by a Secret Service agent. So I don't know, guys. For you, everybody out there that's used to using this or different types of bullets with less gunpowder and things like that, is that a possible thing where you would have something that didn't have that much oomph behind it, where it actually hit the target but didn't penetrate? Comment in the chat and let me know what you think. Steve, you have anything on that?
It sounds plausible.
Okay, I'm
That's
thinking.
about all I can commit to. I'm not a big gun nut, so
Yeah, that's what I'm
hard for me to
saying.
say.
I mean, if it stands to reason, though, if it's got less gunpowder, it's got less oomph, and depending on where it's being
Yeah,
shot
and then
from.
that way you don't have to worry about it going through the target and hitting somebody else
Yeah.
and lodging somewhere else where you don't want it to.
I mean, it makes sense. It's just a working theory. You know, I don't know how much water it holds, but I thought I would throw it out there to the chat and see what you guys think. Comment under, if you're watching it after, comment in, underneath the video, and let me know what you think.
It's a fairy tale. Here we see former Senator Arlen Specter, who in 1964 was a young attorney for the Warren Commission and came up with this single bullet theory. And here he is demonstrating how the bullet went through Kennedy's neck and struck Connally in front. And it seems fairly reasonable until you actually look closely. You'll see in the red circle, the marked with chalk on the back of this fella, and you'll see that he has to hold his straight edge about 6 inches above the shoulder to make it line up with Connally. It just didn't work. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. But nevertheless, they say, well, that's what happened. Further evidence of manipulation and obfuscation of the evidence comes in the medical evidence. Here we see testimony from all the medical people in Dallas who all said Kennedy suffered a gaping wound in the right rear portion of his head.
42 witnesses.
A shot from the front and blowing out the right rear portion of his head. At the time of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they showed us a drawing reportedly of the autopsy photograph, and we see that the back of his head seems to be perfectly intact, but we do see a small, what appears to be a hole up there, and they said this was the entrance wound coming from the rear of his head. And yet, a few years later, when the autopsy photographs themselves became publicly available, we find that there is no hole back there, only what appears perhaps to be a little splotch of dried blood, and there's even hairs growing through it. So again, there was lies and deceit with the medical evidence. Again, the drawings that the House Committee showed us shows this bullet hole. Now it's not in the neck and it's not in the back. It's kind of on the shoulder. And it is not consistent at all with the bullet hole in the jacket. So it's nothing but lies and deceit. Most telling of all is this story, which got very little play in the mass media. Here we see Gerald Custer, who was the X-ray technician who took the X-rays of Kennedy at the autopsy. Also at this same news conference was Floyd Reeby, the photographer who took the autopsy photographs. And both of these men today say that the X-rays and the photographs being shown to the public and being kept in the National Archives are not the ones they took. So we have, again, manipulation, obfuscation of the evidence at the federal level. Here we see what purports to be an X-ray of Kennedy's skull, and it's, as you can see, the whole front right portion of his head seems to be missing. And yet in this autopsy photograph, we plainly see that his forehead is perfectly intact. Gerald Custer, the man who took the original X-rays, said that there was no damage to his face, no part of his skull was missing. These are fake X-rays. So we got fake X-rays and fake photographs now resting in the government archives. Does this explain why there is so much controversy over the Kennedy assassination? But there was not very much controversy in 1964, particularly after this February, the 21st edition of Life magazine, which everybody in the country saw. And we've got a backyard photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a communist newspaper and a rifle, pistol on his belt. And the headline says, Lee Oswald with the weapons he used to kill President Kennedy and Officer Tippit. Now, this was published months before the Warren Commission came out from behind closed doors and concluded that Oswald was probably the lone assassin. This is convicting someone even before they get a fair hearing. But it certainly cemented the idea that Oswald was the killer in the minds of the American public. But was the backyard photograph legitimate? Right there in the Warren report, Captain Fritz tells that Oswald was shown a picture of him holding a rifle and wearing a pistol. And he says this picture had been enlarged by our crime lab from a fixture found in the garage at Mrs. Payne's house. He, meaning Oswald, said the picture was not his, that the face was his face, but this picture was made by someone superimposing his face. The other part of the picture was not him at all, and he had never seen the picture before. A phony picture, a composite picture. Could this be true? Well, we take the two known examples of the backyard photograph and we turn them into a color transparency, one red and one blue. And these are supposedly two separate photographs made with a handheld camera. Nothing should match. And yet when you blow them up to the same proportion, lay one on top of the other, you can see that Oswald's face is an exact match on both photographs. This is an impossibility unless, exactly as he said, it's a composite photograph with one picture of his face pasted over someone else's body. Is there even more evidence of this? Yes. Here we see on either side the backyard photograph, which is essentially the same picture of Oswald's face, only done to a slightly different angle, and someone has retouched the mouth slightly. But you can see that there's a line running from the one corner of his neck to the other corner of his neck, and we see a broad, flat chin. And yet in the center, we have Oswald's police mugshot, which shows that Oswald had a little pointy cliff chin. More evidence that this was a fabricated photograph intended to implicate Oswald. But did the federal authorities at that time realize that this photograph, there was something funny going on here? And I submit to you, yes, they did. And here's why. To the extreme right is a third backyard photograph that turned up 15 years after the assassination in the hands of a Dallas policeman's widow. And she said her husband, the policeman, said, hang on to this, it'll be worth something someday.
There you go.
And we see that this pose is holding a rifle in the left hand, holding the paper up in the right hand. And yet the Warren Commission, Exhibit 337, shows a federal officer posing in the pose of the third photograph, the one that was never accounted for and never explained and never seen for 15 years. This is suppression of evidence. Again,
incredible, right?
Criminal offense.
Amazing.
I make mention of these stills from the Zapruder film for a couple of reasons. Number one, on frame 257, we can see what the back of Kennedy's head should look like with normal shadowing. And then on frame 317, we find what 11 Hollywood experts have said was a painted on black spotch on the back of his head. This is to cover up the massive exit wound on the rear of his head, indicating a shot from the right front. This is tampering with the evidence and with the basic evidence, with the Zapruder film, which has been called probably the best piece of evidence in the case. The lower center, we have a blow up of 314, frame 314, which clearly shows the driver Greer turning to look back over his right shoulder, but his hand remains on the steering wheel. What some people have said is a gun is actually just the sunlight reflecting off of Kellerman's greased hair, because in the 1960s, men were still wearing hair grease. All right. And so I would like to put to rest the story that the driver shot Kennedy. It simply didn't happen. Although there is some question as to the activities of the Secret Service, because as we've seen, they were very slow to react, having stayed up drinking the night before at the Solar Club in Fort Worth. And
Three of them in on it.
Greer, who was the oldest man on the Secret Service detail, testified that he never looked around, didn't even know the assassination had taken place until Roy Kellerman next to him said, "We're hit, get us out of here." And he stepped on the gas and accelerated out of Davie Plaza. But as can be seen plainly, he did turn and look back at Kennedy at the time of the fatal headshot. The brake lights come on, the car slowed down, Kennedy was shot in the head, and then the car accelerated forward.
I think Greer was one of the Secret
Here we
Servicemen that were
see
in on
a
it.
Polaroid
Just want to
snapshot
stop here to
made.
say something, Steve. Steve, I know we're running a little late, honey. If you need to go, I know Holden needs you or whatever. You let me
Yeah,
know.
I'm going to
This
have
has
to
got
take
like
off.
10
This is
minutes here.
fascinating, but I'll
Yeah.
go back and watch the
Can
rest
you
of it.
watch it from the other side? Is anything you want to say? What do you got coming up? You got
Just uh, watch this space. got
watch this.
stuff coming. Yeah,
That's good. That's good.
but
And I'm
this has
so
blown my
glad to
mind
have you.
so far. But I'll go back and watch the
I
rest of
put
it
the link. I
when I
put the
can.
link in the chat. It's just Crossfire Jim Mars on YouTube. It's free for anybody. This has got another 10 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and play it out. I love you. Give Holden big kisses for me.
Love you
Give
too,
a Nick a
Cisco.
hug.
Everybody
And
in
I'm
the
so
crowd.
glad to have you back tonight. Thank you,
Yeah, good to be
sweetheart.
back. Love, peace, and chicken grease. Good night, everybody.
See you next Monday too. Maybe we'll do
All
Frankenstein. That'll be fun.
right, sounds good.
I
Bye,
love you,
everybody.
baby. Good night, buddy. I could tell when he starts scratching and looking behind. If Holden needs him, we need to let him go. So I'm so glad to have him back tonight, and I think this is going to be a great summer. We're going to do some really fun things. I'm going to keep doing this till I'm done, but I'm going to break it up with ghost videos and things like that. I wanted to get a large block of this done because there's been so much research and trying to also find a way to present it where it's cohesive, where you can kind of get it. Because, man, I'm telling you, you could do, think of one episode on Oswald. This is the most complex 24-year-old ever. But I did want to stop and say a couple of things. Don't be confused by them saying that there's more than one Oswald. I believe there was. This was a very common practice for these agencies. I would bet you there was more than one Sirhan. Now, does that mean there were clones? No, I'm not saying that. They find people that look just enough alike. And in most cases, in the Oswalds that you're hearing about, didn't look anything like him. The one in Mexico was some 6-foot blonde guy. There was another guy that was on a shooting range just a couple of days before, shooting other people's targets and saying, I'm Lee Oswald. Didn't look anything like him, but people remember the name and they're trying to cause confusion. And you remember in episode 2, I told you that something that's very damaging, as if all this hasn't been, Oswald, I believe, was, like an intelligence cowboy. So cowboys were just sent out where they wanted, where they needed them to be. They didn't know what they were going to do. They'd get some throwaway job just to keep them in the area. And then they'd get a phone call or they'd check in and told, you go here, you pick up an envelope, you take it here, you hand it to this person, blah, blah, blah. The way Oswald was acting that day when he was picked up and they were asking him, so who are you? Are you Lee Harvey Oswald or are you Heidel? And he said, you're the cops. You figure it out. He's nice. He's calm. He's just been roughed up in the theater. He's a black guy. He's gone through all this stuff, but he still doesn't act like somebody who's in trouble. That somebody's been caught doing something. And he's not really acting like I'm an arrogant, psychopath and I'm just having the time of my life here. He's not doing that. He's acting, in my opinion, like someone who thinks all I got to do is make a phone call and I'm out of here, just like all the other times. Well, this time it didn't work. This time he was stuck like a rat. And then he slowly starts changing when he realizes these things. You can see it. He only had a weekend, but you can see it, in my opinion. Let's continue. We're almost done with this. It's about 10 minutes.
By bystander Mary Mormon, right about the time of the fatal headshot. In the upper right-hand corner, we can see Abraham Zapruder and his receptionist, Marilyn Sitzman, making his famous film. And then we can see Kennedy slumped in the car with Jackie kind of bending over him. But in the background, behind the picket fence, behind the concrete wall, we see this figure of a man. And this has not been doctored, has not been photoshopped, has not been tampered with. This is strictly a blow up of the image in the background. And a similar Polaroid camera has been tested, and it is found that they do have sharp enough detail and focus to get a picture like this. And what we see is this blow up, which is clearly shows a man. You can see his two eyes, his hairline, his left ear, you can see a white flash in front of his face, either smoke or flash from a gun, and his arms are in the classic rifle holding position. And he's wearing a dark shirt with a similar semicircular patch on the left shoulder and a bright object on his chest, which by computer analysis is shown to be metal. Here on the right is the blow up of the figure that has come to be known as the Badge Man. Next to that, we can see a Dallas police uniform with the semicircular patch on the left arm and the badge on the right chest. And then at the extreme left, you can see a artist representation of what you're seeing here, the Badge Man photograph. So now we have a photograph of a man firing a weapon from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. The House Select Committee on Assassinations finally concluded that there was a conspiracy because at least one shot came from behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. And based on two separate sets of acoustical scientists who used sound signatures to identify the grassy knoll as a place for one of the shots. Now, if this was any other case other than the Kennedy assassination, and I tried to tell you that we have a photograph of a man firing from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. We have the majority of witnesses in that area saying a shot came from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. We got a picture of smoke drifting out from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. And we got acoustical studies pinpointing the behind the fence on the grassy knoll as a source for at least one shot. Then if I tried to tell you there was nobody there, you would think I was an absolute fool. And yet this is the Kennedy assassination, and there are still people who seriously argue there was nobody behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll.
I love Jim Marrs so much. So much. I really do. Penn was a cool bird too. I remember we saw this in The Men Who Killed Kennedy. We saw this picture and we talked about all the people around. The young man was going in the Navy. In 3 days he went to Alaska, remember?
So what we see is that there has been a tremendous cover-up at the level of the federal government of the United States. And it's this cover-up, this suppression of evidence, destruction of evidence, fabrication of evidence, alteration of evidence, intimidation of witnesses. These are all crimes in connection with a capital murder. And they all were committed at the level of the federal government. This is what transforms what at that time was nothing but another Texas homicide to a national coup d'etat. Now, why would they want to get rid of the chief executive? Because John F. Kennedy was shaking up the status quo. Let's go back and look at some of the things that he was doing. To begin with, he forced the steel manufacturers to roll back their price increases that they promised they were not going to do, and they did anyway. And he went on television and said, this is not right. And the public got with him, and they forced the steel manufacturers to roll back their prices. His brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, was prosecuting organized crime as never before or since. In fact, on the morning of the assassination, he met with his organized crime task force. And then about noontime, of course, his brother was killed, and the task force never met again. President Kennedy also was trying to put a stop to the CIA and the military making raids on Cuba. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, they continued to push for another invasion of Cuba. In fact, in the spring of 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff approved a plan called Operation Northwoods. And this horrendous plan called for assassinating American citizens in some of our cities, setting off bombs in major American cities, hijacking planes and ships, and blaming it all on Castro so they could stir up support for another invasion of Cuba.
Sound familiar? It should.
Probably the ranking officials of the CIA, the military, they did not realize that there had been secret agreements made at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy and Khrushchev worked out a deal where Khrushchev agreed to withdraw the offensive missiles from Cuba. In exchange, we agreed to withdraw our offensive missiles from Turkey and pledged that we would not invade or support a military invasion of Cuba, which we have not. But a lot of the lower echelon people were not aware of these agreements, and so they were still pushing for an invasion of Cuba. Kennedy and Khrushchev were also reaching agreements on ban on above ground nuclear testing. They put in the hotline to Moscow. They were actually working to try to end the Cold War, which did not set well with the military bases in either country. Kennedy may have also sealed his fate when he talked about doing away with the oil depletion allowance, which was the bedrock of Texas oil money. Got all the oil and gas people mad at him. The mafia's mad at him. The military's mad at him. And then in the summer of 1963, he ordered $4.2 billion of interest-free money issued through the Treasury Department, not the interest-bearing Federal Reserve System, thus becoming the second president in American history to try to issue money that was free of interest from the international bankers. The first president being Abraham Lincoln, who printed his own greenbacks to finance the war between the states. And I, for one, do not feel like that it was just sheer coincidence that both of those presidents were shot in the head in public. This is a $5 bill, series 1963, and you'll notice it says United States note and has red ink on it. This was part of the money that Kennedy issued that was interest-free because it was issued through the Treasury Department, not the Federal Reserve System. One thing that definitely changed with the death of John F. Kennedy was our involvement in Vietnam. Here we see National Security Action Memorandum number 263, issued on October the 11th, 1963, just about a week after the Diem brothers were killed. And the Vietnam struggle was beginning to reach a turning point. In this document, it says the president approved the military recommendations contained in the report of McNamara and Maxwell Taylor, who had gone to report on the situation in Vietnam, and they reported that they thought we had a handle on the situation and that we might be able to withdraw all troops by the end of 1965. President approved this, and then, according to this, directed no formal announcement be made, but to withdraw 1,000 U.S. military personnel by the end of 1963. So Kennedy was going to disengage us from Vietnam. No Vietnam War, with the attendant raping of our budget, the conflict between the generations, the 58,000 deaths, the people who were maimed, the families that were torn apart. None
That's
of that
just
would have
Americans,
happened if
though.
Kennedy had lived. But there were people who wanted that war. Just 3 days after his assassination, then President Lyndon Johnson issued this National Security Action Memorandum number 273. And although it starts off saying the objectives of the United States with respect to the withdrawal of U.S. military personnel remain as stated in the White House statement of October the 2nd. It says it's going to, everything's going to stay the same. Here under item 6, we find programs of military and economic assistance should be maintained at such levels that their magnitude and effectiveness in the eyes of the Vietnam government do not fall below the levels sustained by the United States at the time of the Diem government. Well, this is a convoluted way of saying we're not going to drop the financial or the military aid to South Vietnam. So in other words, this stopped these pullout orders. The 1,000 men that Kennedy said he was going to withdraw did not withdraw.
He's going to bring them
home
for
Christmas. The document goes on to state the plausibility of denial, that they could deny what was really going on, damage to North Vietnam. We're going to start bombing the North. We're going to widen the war, and even spread to drawing up plans against
Laos.
Okay, it's really fascinating. But the most fascinating thing appears here in this document, which was taken from the LBJ Library in Austin, Texas. This is the draft of Johnson's National Security Action Memorandum 273, which blocked Kennedy's pullout order and set us on a course for full-time involvement in Vietnam. And what you notice is that this draft was written on November the 21st.
The 21st.
1963, the day before Kennedy went to Dallas and was assassinated.
Lyndon knew, honey.
Somebody knew the day before that he wasn't going to be there to implement his pullout orders in Vietnam. And instead, we were going to be launching a full-bore effort for war in Southeast Asia.
There it is. That's a big elephant in the room. Pisses me right off.
One final piece of evidence has to do with President Kennedy's personal secretary, Evelyn Lincoln. She was at his elbow almost day and night. If there was anyone who knew what his real thoughts were, what was really going on within the government, it was probably Evelyn Lincoln. And yet I doubt any of us have ever seen an interview with Evelyn Lincoln. Why
So
not?
important.
Was she hesitant? Was she
Listen.
not talk to anyone? No. Here's a letter from 1994 where Evelyn Lincoln states, as far as the assassination is concerned, it's my belief that there was a conspiracy because there were those who disliked him and felt the only way to get rid of him was to assassinate him. These 5 conspirators, in my opinion, were Lyndon B. Johnson, J. Edgar Hoover, the Mafia, the CIA, and the Cubans in Florida. Very good guess, Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
She knew what was happening, and it's time the American public knew. John J. McCloy was former CEO of National City Bank, which is now Citicorp, and during the 1930s presided over a lot of loans to the Nazis in Germany. At the end of the war, he was made High Commissioner of Germany and shipped a lot of unrepentant Nazis over to this country, where his protege, Allen Dulles, was head of the CIA and whitewashed their Nazi backgrounds. And then John J. McCloy ended up sitting on the Warren Commission to determine what happened to President Kennedy. While serving on that commission, he stated, it was of paramount importance to show the world that America is not a banana republic where a government can be changed by conspiracy. And that was their objective, is to try to scotch any talk of conspiracy. And that's been going on to this very day. And there are still those in the status quo establishment who do not want to mention the coup of 1963. But unfortunately, my fellow Americans, America is just another banana republic, because in November of 1963, our nation and our future was altered by a murderous conspiracy accomplished at the highest levels of the federal government of the United States. And that's all you need to know about the Kennedy assassination.
There it is, folks.
As you can see, the evidence for a conspiracy at the highest levels of the federal government of the United States is quite compelling, if not overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
In fact, if you want to name 2 people who could be considered guilty, it would be Lyndon Johnson and his next door neighbor and old buddy, J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI. How can I say that? Can I prove that they ordered the assassination? No, but what I can prove beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt is that these 2 men took steps to confuse, confound, and block any legitimate investigation into Kennedy's death. Under our legal system, that makes them accessories after the fact. And there have been people executed for murder who the facts of the case show did not pull the trigger, were not the killers, but they were there. They had knowledge of the crime and they didn't report it. They didn't turn in the true culprits, and therefore they were accessories after the fact and are considered under our legal system as guilty as the person who pulls the trigger. And under that criteria, Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover are guilty, but they didn't act alone. There was a whole raft of Americans who had no direct connection to the assassination, but the end result, the elimination of John F. Kennedy and his policies to curtail the power of the banks and the corporations and the military industrial complex, and to try to bring the United States into a more peaceful and progressive country, they couldn't stand the idea. And they felt like the only way they could protect the country was to get rid of the leader. And therefore, as we see, and much to the chagrin of John J. McCloy, America is simply another banana republic.
Thank you, Jim. I hope you saw that we're still listening. He saw. Thank you. All right, so that is Crossfire. Mr. Jim Marrs. I highly recommend his books. I highly recommend reading Crossfire. I would get the version that has been revised. He revised it before he passed, added in new information, solidified everything he just said there and more. Catch any interviews. He was on the panel. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was the one with Geraldo Rivera. We watched a little piece of it. Madeline Brown was on the panel. Jim was there and a couple others. I think Grogan might have been there too. The gentleman who's probably the specialist, let's say, on the Zapruder film. This whole genre has so many specialists on, like Vince Palomara. He's the specialist on the Secret Service. So you can follow any one of these leads, but understand it's only a part of the tapestry. It's only, certain threads that are running through. Now, as you can see, as our series is growing, you can see those threads getting bolder and the colors getting brighter on certain people, on certain different things that are involved that are really solidifying on this. Like I said, I think the most helpful thing is to go back and look at the people that were taken out and what did they want to say? What did whoever was doing this, whoever was picking the people, take him out, get rid of him, get rid of this one. You can't let them talk, that kind of thing. What did they not want you to hear? So who got their testimony changed if they were interviewed by the Warren Committee, whatever you want to call it. Me personally, I think I would like to see, before I pass over, them change the name of that damn airport, because Dulles and his brother, again, big time involved in this. And nothing is, when you talk to somebody who's worn a uniform, who took the oath, who took things seriously, although, my military career, I wouldn't put it up against anybody's. I was not a combat vet. I was not, I was not a hero. But I did stand up and I took that oath. And I'm telling you, when you do that, it means something. I didn't join for college. I didn't join for whatever they could, hand out. I joined because I wanted to wear a uniform. I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to protect my country. And here you have the head of the FBI for over 40 years and the new president of the United States involved in this stuff, along with many others. I mean, they couldn't do it by themselves, obviously. Now you've got people on the ground, the White Sox guys, the guy with the umbrella. He knew what was going on. You see what I mean? But could you have some people coming out of Miami, a hit team over in one corner and another hit team over here that maybe the French sent, or maybe they went, like that Christian David. They asked him if he wanted, if he would be a part of it. He turned it down when he found out it was president, because he said, if you're going to kill a president, they're going to kill you. So you don't talk. And most hitmen knew this, right? I have a whole series on when did they start killing certain groups and why. So in 75, you had another blast of killings because there was a committee that you had, the church committee. It had nothing to do with churches. That was the man's name. And they were starting to interview again. Anytime that something like this came out and somebody was going to get subpoenaed, whacked. Okay. We'll talk about that on another episode. We'll deep dive into Ruby. We'll deep dive into Tippett. We'll deep dive into Oswald. By the time we're done, just like everything else, when I did Amityville, when I did Velisca, when I did Lizzie Borden, all of these, I'm going to do it till I'm done. But in between now, after this one, now that we've got a good foundation, I'm going to spread them out a little bit so we can get a couple of good ghost stories and things like that in here too. So at the end of this, I'm going to finish it off like I always do. The last episode will be paranormal, supernatural. And if there's any ghost stories or hauntings or anything, like, can you imagine? Why wouldn't this Dealey Plaza be haunted or something, around that has to do with it, right? We're going to pull up that and we'll finish it off with the paranormal, because Anytime you have this kind of good history, there's usually a lot of good ghost stories connected with it too. I personally don't know of any off the top of my head, so I'm looking forward to looking into that, and that's how I usually finish these up. But while we're still talking about Jim Mars, I wanted to make sure you had the information for him. This is his book. This is the revised and updated Jim Mars edition. And I also wanted to, let me see if I can find this real quick for you. Excuse me. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm trying to hang in there for you. Was this it? This might be it. No, that's not it. Okay. Here's a little thing I wanted to spring on you. Now, when you start talking about, and I always say, who had the power, who had the ability, who had the opportunity, who had the motive, you heard Jim talking about all the oil stuff. What you didn't hear about the Khrushchev stuff is the Kennedy kind of went about that a little outside of the realm here. They had like a go-between that knew Khrushchev. Now, keeping in mind that some people are surrounded by others, like war hawks and stuff like that, to be able to talk to Khrushchev through this one person that went to school with him, he knew Khrushchev, he was close to him, and try to get Khrushchev's actual feelings and get Kennedy's feelings across rather than going back and forth with these phone calls and these committees and your ambassadors and everything else. He went and talked to Khrushchev, said, look, I want peace. What do you want? We got to get all these, these weapons of mass destruction under control here. And he made a deal with him and he started creating peace and they started pulling out weapons. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the generals, wanted him tried for treason for that because he went around back channels for peace. So there was so much coming on to Kennedy. You have to understand every angle they were coming at him. You've got so many people talking about this before it ever happened. You've got the two different, the FBI and the CIA both put on paper, it's called a flash hold on Oswald. So anybody that's wondering if Oswald worked for any of these intelligence agencies, you're not doing any research. It's undisputed at this point, at least by people who understand. And some people just don't know because you haven't dug in. You kind of go on the surface and you just hear little things and but he definitely was, because you have two separate agencies putting a flash hold on him separately, and they didn't communicate together very well. That was a problem then, and apparently it was a problem now, because wasn't that the big problem at Butler, PA? There was no communication between the Secret Service and the local police department, the local sheriff department, right? Isn't that weird? Wouldn't you think that they would have the best communication ever? Don't we just assume that they have the best equipment? We have the best people involved. They know what they're doing. Makes you a little unsettled, doesn't it? Think about that. Here's another little thing. For people that tell me, oh, LBJ, yeah, he went to the party. Yeah, he told Marilyn Brown that after tomorrow, I'll never have to deal with those son of a bitch Kennedy brothers bothering me again. That's not a threat. That's a promise. He said it to her that night, and he called her that day, and she asked him about it. And he said it again, right? We all heard her say it. On top of everything else. But here's a big one. When you start looking at who LBJ hung with, and we heard a lot of that in episode 1, we went through the Men Who Killed Kennedy and the episode that was banned, because remember, the Men Who Killed Kennedy, the little series that we've been watching along, and we'll pull that up on the next episode. It'll come back and we'll finish it through. It was done in sections, and there was a 2-year gap between adding 3 more, because the producers and the writers were finding more information. This was all done in England, okay? And the History Channel, I believe it was, bought it and said, we'll go ahead and play it. Well, they played up the first few, and then it stopped. Then you had a gap. They made the 3 more, and they bought those 2, and they were going to play them. They played them once. That was the first one you got to see where it really focused on LBJ. And there was 2 other ones. There was the Julie Ferry Baker one and another one. I can't remember which one it is, but I have it. So the thing was, they played it once. Well, everybody that was alive that was related to LBJ wanted to sue him. They said, you can't play it anymore. History Channel never played it again. So you'll see on YouTube and other channels and things like that. This is the banned episode. You saw that first. That was the one about LBJ. So within that, you had a lot of information. Here's something else. Who do you think, just for giggles, owned the school book depository building? Just think. I'll tell you who it was. Mayor Campbell. Oh, wait. No, it wasn't him. Hold on one second. This is Mayor Campbell. Hold on. Here he is. D.H. Byrd was the owner of the Texas School Book Depository at the time of the assassination. Byrd was one of the founding members of the Civil Air Patrol, which Oswald was involved in, by the way. There's pictures of them both together. Training. And he oversaw operations in Texas and Louisiana. And he was a member of the Dallas Petroleum Club. Petroleum, oil. Although his initial wealth came from oil, he made his fortune with Temco aircraft, LTV. After the assassination, Byrd had a window from the 6th floor depository removed and hung up in his home. I wonder which window that was. Now, it says here on a document that Byrd's father was the one that had the window removed several weeks after November 22nd, 1963, because visitors were stealing pieces of it. And this is why he took it out. The window was on display at Byrd's home until his death in 1986. This is Byrd, very, very good friends with a certain individual. Here's the picture. You see Oswald in the right-hand circle. This is Byrd over here on the left. And you'll see lots of pictures of like this coming up in the future of Oswald being involved in certain things like Fair Play for Cuba, training for the Bay of Pigs, and with David Ferry and all that. They were all involved in all of this. It was all intertwined. This is Byrd here in the uniform, and there's the school book depository. Now, D.H. Byrd and Lyndon Baines Johnson were close friends and allies connected through Texas politics, the Sweet 8F group, and personal ties, including Byrd's marriage to Mavis Heath, a friend of Johnson's. Their relationship was strong enough for Byrd to claim direct access to LBJ for political favors, and LBJ's presidency directly benefited Byrd's LTV through a major defense contract. How's that for a little fact? There's going to be lots of those coming up. Isn't that odd that the path of the motorcade got changed at the last minute to go down Elm Street right past that building? Coincidence. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Here's another coincidence before we leave. 5 more minutes. I told you when this started that a lot of times when I do this, remember when I did the Lon Chaney senior episode where I told you, he was with me for all week. I'd look and he'd be in the corner and he's just smiling and watching it was crazy. Sometimes we get these connections with people, and I guess it's just like when you think of a loved one that's passed and you connect into their energy. I think that's what happens. We connect into that energy. Well, I was feeling an energy and I didn't know who it was. And it was something different. But I also felt when I started writing about this that they were pleased with it. They weren't upset by it. And it started to get a little clearer. And the day before I started, I can't remember what part of the series I was on. I said, you know what? I'm going back. I want to get some of these earlier researchers, and I want to see if I can find interviews on them or read their books and bring up parts of it. I said, I really want to go back and get somebody that was there. And I bumped into Penn Jones Jr. I started looking into him and listening to him speak, and I was like, man, I love this guy. I mean, he's a pit bull, and I just love that. He's not letting go. They can't intimidate him. He's not going to stop. You'll hear that his newspaper got blew up. It had nothing to do with this. It happened a year before, so don't get those mixed. And he'll tell you that too. So I found an old interview, and I'm listening to it. And toward the end, it was a fantastic interview. I highly recommend it. And while I'm listening to it, I'm thoroughly enjoying it because there's so much good information coming straight from this man whose heart was just absolutely broken over this. He just so devastated by this, the killing of this president. And while I'm listening to it, I hear him say something that absolutely floored me. Because when I began this, I started telling you about my theory on how I look at things like, some people want to make a patchwork quilt, and it's a crazy quilt. There's just different, there's no pattern to it whatsoever. It's just, I'm getting my piece in there. And it's just big, heavy, cumbersome thing, and nobody's communicating on this quilt. When you look at it like a big picture, like a tapestry with the threads, it makes sense. Everybody's thread is important. Leave it there. It's not mutually exclusive. We have to stop thinking like that. We have to stop thinking that if it was two French hitmen, oh, that's them. The French did it. No. That's too easy. This is more complex than that. Okay. Multiple things going on at the same time. You have to look at it like a big picture. I promise you, Scout's honor. I have never heard this interview before. I've never heard Penn Jones speak before. To my knowledge, I mean, it might have been a kid listening on a car radio and maybe something seeped into my head. I can't deny that. But nothing that I recall. And listen to what this man says. This is going to be Penn Jones speaking. And it's almost like he's talking to me from the other side. So you want a little supernatural? Here you go. Listen to what he says. And then we'll get out of here. I love y'all. Thanks for hanging with me. Sorry, it's been a rough, choppy couple of weeks, man, but I'm doing my best to hang in there. I got Mother's Day week coming up. I got to work tomorrow. It's going to be crazy. We got flowers. Everybody's got a mother, right? So some actually want to send them flowers. All right, where is it? Come on. Yep, here it is. No. Yes, no, that's not it. Hold on. Here it is. This is a fantastic interview. I'll put the link in the chat. Here we go. Listen closely.
Called and listened to and believed. I think that whether this man is a kook or not, he should have been allowed to come and tell his story to the commission so that we all could maybe evaluate it and not rely upon the lie detector techniques of the Dallas Police Department.
How many witnesses were not called to testify before the commission? I mean witnesses to the assassination.
I think it would have run into the dozens.
These people are accessible to you today, are they, many of them?
Well,
my feeling, you see, after going and visiting you in Dallas and traveling around somewhat, was the feeling, I had a feeling that there was fertile ground for an investigation, an additional investigation of the assassination. People.
1 second. Let me move it down here to where it starts. It's right about here.
In view of those actions, we must proceed by assuming that he is at this time sane and should pay some attention to the things that he has to say.
I want to ask you, what do you feel is Ruby's fate? What lies ahead for him? Do you see an eventual release for him, a long imprisonment, or what?
No. I have already made the prediction in print that he will be killed, not legally executed. I think that he's going to be murdered. Not in Dallas. They've had enough killings in Dallas, but I think that someday he's going to be adjudged insane and will be moved out to one of the state insane asylums in some little town where he probably will meet his fate at the hands of maybe an enraged inmate. I don't know. This is certainly speculation, but
you wasn't wrong. Here it comes.
That's the way I think. I think the man knows too much. I think he was very small in the conspiracy to kill the president. I look at this conspiracy to kill the president as compared with a giant mosaic made up of thousands of threads. And I think that both Ruby and Oswald were very little men and maybe had only one thread to put in place in this mosaic. But I think that they were watched, they were carefully watched to see that they put that thread in place at the time it was supposed to be put in place. I think Oswald told the truth on Friday night at 7:55 when he almost screamed to a bunch of reporters, "I'm just a patsy."
Well, that remark was cut out of some of the television.
That's true. It was cut out,
videotapes.
but certainly there's no
It
doubt
has been
that
replayed
he's.
once since then. I believe a number of researchers have made.
Well, it's in the
audio.
notes of Thayer Waldo
Yes.
and Seth Cantor
Seth
and,
Cantor
and
was
Waldo
the
too.
Scripps Howard reporter.
Yes. That,
Now,
There you go. Threads. That blew me away. He says, I look at this as a large mosaic. I said tapestry. Do you think we're channeling Penn Jones? Could be. Could be. You know, I think anybody that dedicates their life to digging up the truth and just showing it to people and going, you have to understand this is what's happening around you. That's what I'm trying to do. And I hope you'll pass it on. I hope that it's helping you understand a little bit of what went on. And we've spoken every episode of why this is still important, because it's still happening. Please see it. Don't allow it. I love you all. Thank you for being here with me. I realize a lot of people don't want to see this. It's confusing. It's hard to wrap your head around. It's a horrible, horrible subject. But if I lose every subscriber I have on every channel that I broadcast this on, I am doing this for my country, for my own heart and mind, and my peace of mind. And if one person listens and sees what's happening today and says, not again, it will not be in vain. And all of the dedication that all these wonderful researchers that I'm trying to bring up in every episode, their life research won't be in vain. We're just people trying to get out the truth because we deserve the truth. And this country deserves the truth. I love you all. Have a good night. And we're going to get out of here. I hope this finds you well. I am going to try one more time tomorrow to play a movie. If it gets cut off, then I'm going to say other people can do it because they have something I don't, like a premium or something along those lines. I don't get it. But because they're not telling me, I can't fix it. If they don't tell me what the problem is, I can't fix it. So I'm going to try again because I love y'all and I love being in there on Tuesday night watching movies. I think we're going to watch, I'll see what I can come up with. If I can come up with Executive Decision with 1975 movie about this, or I'll come up with another one. I got to work tomorrow, so I'll see what I can do. But here's the plan. If we're watching a movie and it gets cut off, I want you to email me. I'm not going to come to your house. I'm not going to hit you with emails. I don't send out group emails. I don't do that. I just don't have the time, to hit people like that. And I don't like it done to me, so I won't do it to you. If I'm telling you, the only reason you're going to email me, journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. If we're watching the movie and it cuts off, I will send you the link that I'm using to show the movie so you can at least finish it. I hate it that they're doing that. Let us watch an hour and then cut it. But other people are doing it, and I think I figured out what the problem was. But again, it's only trial and error. So bear with me if you want to be with me tomorrow night. If you don't, I understand completely. But I'm going to give it another shot, and to the best of my ability. I love you all. Remember JFK. Remember Bobby. Whether you liked them or not, human beings, and they did not deserve this, and the country did not deserve to be lied to. And we're going to get out as much truth as we can. I love you all. Have a good night. Be blessed. Tell the people you love them that you love them, and be kind to your mom this week. Remember her as well. Okay, whether she's here or over there, mine's over on the other side, and I send her happy thoughts and energy. And she sent me a little hello the other day, and she always does every Mother's Day. It's wonderful, and I appreciate it very much. And I love you all. Good night, everybody. I can't believe I was muted that whole time. Oh my God. Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow night if we can get a movie. What I was saying is please